Hi, my name is Professor Dr. Debarati Halder, and in this session, we are going to discuss about historical development of victimology. There are three distinct historical eras that defined victims' roles within the justice system. From here, we can understand the three distinct historical eras of development of victimology. The Golden Age. This came prior to the written laws. This had victim-driven approach. Victims had a direct role in deciding what should be the fate of the offenders. Here, victims actively sought revenge or compensation. Next came the Dark Age. This came with the emergence of structured local governments and the development of formal legal statute. In the Golden Age, the rule was cow for a cow, or in the Golden Age, the victims could decide what should be the fate of the offender, as the victim may have lost limb or the victim may have lost a family member. The victim may decide that the offender may also be chopped off of his limb, or the offender's relatives may be killed. But in the Dark Age, this system started changing. In this system, criminal-oriented justice system started arising. Here, it was perpetrated against the laws of the king or the state, not just against a victim or the victim's family, which means the state was also considered as the victim, and slowly the actual victim or the primary victim started taking a backseat when it came to the criminal justice mechanism. Then came the re-emergence of the victims. This happened during 1950s and 1960s. Victims were brought back to the mainstream criminal justice system or victim justice system, that is, the primary victims. More emphasis was given on the role of victim in causation of crimes. Quite from this time, the concept of compensation to the victim also started in a modern way. Let us now see the ancient scripts that mentioned about victims' rights. These can include the Smritis of Hindu Shastra, the Vedas, Arthashastra, Hammurabi's Code, and also Magna Carta. Now, let us understand the summary of ancient scripts which laid down the rights of the victims. It discussed about rights of the victims of general crimes, rights of the victims of abuse of power by the state, rights to fair justice, that is, retributive aspect of eye for an eye, right to compensation, that is, providing cow for the crime of stealing or killing of a cow. We will now go for a criticism for each age. The Golden Age was severely criticized by the modern victimologists and criminologists. The victim-driven approaches to justice became somewhat problematic as populations grew and as families and groups expanded. In place of the actual criminal his or her kinsman might bear the responsibility for the harm that had been caused. That means, for example, if a victim has lost his or her relative, the actual criminal may also be liable for killing or for letting his family member be killed. In case the actual criminal or the offender is not found, then the complete liability or burden may fall on the relatives of that particular offender. Successive generations would inherit any insult and injustice because of the enmity between the victim and the offender. And as a result, long-lasting blood feuds would happen between families or tribes. The Dark Age and its criticism. The modern criminal justice systems do not necessarily seek to help the victim in a given case. This is mostly the state which gets the actual benefit of becoming a victim. It has also been understood that laws created to protect cultures, societies, and institutions, and not the victims in general, actually help the state and not the actual victims. It has also been suggested as a criticism to the Dark Age that more focus to punishment to criminals, fines, etc. has been seen and not much focus has been given to the rights of the victims. Also, it has been suggested that deterrence theory may not help the direct victims. The World War and the victims of crime. The victimological development can also be seen through certain phenomena, that is, World War. In this era, the humanitarian law, that is, law of war, fair treatment of wounded and dead persons or dead bodies, victims of war zone, etc., developed, and thereby the victims were given proper rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and recognitions of victims' rights were also seen from a very narrow aspect, even though also helped to grow the victimological understanding. Victims of Holocaust, Nuremberg trial, etc. also helped the development of victims' rights. During this time and also in the later times, women as victims of war started attracting the attention of victimologists, and the concept of victimology also started growing. We will now discuss about the explanation of reemergence of victims from 1960 onwards. The victims' right movement. During this time, a proper shifting towards victims' right was noticed. The US government funded National Crime Victimization Survey of criminal activities that were not reported to the police. This time also saw the women's right movement. Patterns of victimization of women attracted the attention of victimologists, criminologists, sociologists, legal academicians and scholars, etc. The stakeholders also started studying victimization of women within marriage system. Emotional and mental health of women also attracted the attention of the stakeholders. It also saw the expanding victim assistance approach, that is, from criminal justice society to the voluntary organizations. Many NGOs came up for providing victim assistance to the women. This period also saw good judgments or orders on women's rights. For example, on right to abortion, Roe versus Wade came up in 1973, which is a phenomenal judgment on women's right to decide over their own body, especially for abortion. This period also saw child right movement. During this time, the rights of the child started getting acknowledgement and also recognition from various stakeholders and also organizations including the UN. Stakeholders also noticed mental health of children. There was enormous growth of child care institutes all over the world. This period also saw civil rights movement. There were movements for right against racism, discrimination, etc. Thank you.